Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I would like to talk about some question of environmental taxes and charges. There are several problems with environmental taxes and charges today. Whether environmental issues can be taken into account in the context of the energy crisis, and whether it is possible to make certain energy sources more expensive. At the same time, the climate crisis is not on hold, and countries need to introduce additional strict rules to ensure sustainable management. Environmental taxes and charges play an important role in this regulation. But what are the problems? Okay. First of all, I would like to talk about the condition for environmental taxation. The following issues arise in relation to condition for environmental taxation: the imposition of taxes and charges, tax rates, tax burden, administrative issues, and border adjustment. I need to talk about levying of taxes. When levying taxes and charges, attention should be paid to whether they are directly or indirectly related to the damage caused. If the pollution is significant and localized, the application of taxes is effective, whereas if the pollution is small, the product is consumed in large quantities, and despite the application of charges is appropriate. The optimal tax rate has a fundamental impact on the efficiency of taxation. The rate should be set with the environmental objective in mind and should be set at a level that can be tuned to achieve the optimum level through continuous adjustment. It is therefore appropriate to differentiate that rate using a lower rate for long-term objectives and higher rate for short-term objectives. Differentiation according to pollutant content is also important. The problem with the issue of tax burden is that the tax burden can be passed on by the taxpayer. That is, the taxpayer and the person who actually bears the tax burden differ in several cases. The burden of the tax or charge may be borne by the consumer, the owner of capital, the owner of labor, the owner of national resource. Depending on their market position, taxpayers may try to pass on the tax, which may cause social or economic problems. Therefore, when introducing a tax, it is necessary to analyze the effects of the tax to be introduced if it is passed on. The analysis of administrative issues is important in the field of taxation because it is necessary to assess whether the tax collected is proportionate to the cost and administration involved in its collection. Environmental taxes and charges represent a relatively low revenue from fees compared to the total tax and fee revenue and the main tax categories, for example, personal income tax. It is preferable to use tax authorities specialized in the collection of traditional taxes to collect the tax, as setting up a separate authority is not a cost-effective solution. Integrating taxes into the existing tax and fee system also reduce administrative cost. International aspects must also be taken into account. Poorly chosen taxation can affect international competitiveness and efficiency of economic instruments. The problem of taxes on production and taxes on consumption is different in this respect. When production or activity is taxed, only domestic production is affected, but nevertheless, if the tax in neighboring country on the substitute product is lower, competitiveness problems may arise. In the case of consumption, however, not only the domestic product, but also the imported product is taxed. If the product is sustainable, substitutable, the demand for the substitute product may increase. Let's move on to the second area. This is some disadvantages and advantages of environmental taxes. First of all, analyzing the advantage of environmental taxes. First, static incentives, efficient management of a given technology for emission performance. Tax provide an incentive to the polluter, making them interested in using the technology efficiently to reduce pollution. Dynamic incentive tax provide incentive for new technologies and for pollution reduction. Taxes provide a continuous incentive to reduce pollution continuously, where appropriate below the level required by the authorities. Tax rebate provide a source of funds for the development of new technologies, generating further cost efficiencies. Regulation of general nature. The taxes are uniform for all polluters, so the regulation cannot take into account the circumstances of individual firms. In many cases, environmental regulators need to consult with polluters on rates and technological requirements. However, this negotiated approach can be ineffective, as polluter may soften the regulators, possible requesting individual exemption. This is not the case with taxes, so environmental efficiency is not reduced by the normative nature of taxes. Some disadvantages of environmental taxes. First, uncertain environmental impact. Environmental taxes have an incentive effect and do not guarantee pollution levels, unlike direct regulation. There are costs where the pollution is borne by the parties concerned, so in cases where it is important to meet the environmental objective of pollution levels precisely, taxes may not be sufficiently effective. Next, pollution avoidance activities. Environmental taxes can also have harmful effects on the environment, which may be more severe than in the absence of full regulation. Taxation of waste can provide incentive to reduce waste, but can also lead to illegal dumping and incineration. In this case, the social cost of subsequent disposal and environmental damage is even greater than the cost and impact of pollution. Next, policy considerations. Environmental taxes are not always politically acceptable. The reduction in pollution as an environmental effect of taxes is politically accepted, but in many cases polluters reject taxation and prefer other instruments instead, which also affects political positions. Next, distributional effects. Environmental taxation applies to transport, the carbon content of fuels or energy in general. Low-income households spend a large part of their expenditure of energy and transport, so increasing environmental taxes increases prices and reduce the income of these households. Higher income households who would otherwise be more willing to spend more for cleaner environment are less affected by a change in the environmental tax burden. To sum up, I believe in environmental taxes and charges.